Key Visual Arts is one of the most well-known visual novel developers, known for titles like Clannad, Little Busters, Summer Pockets, Air, and Canon. They make emotional, dramatic stories. If there's one that stands out, the black sheep of Key, it would be Rewrite. Rewrite is a title that's either loved or loathed by Key fans. This is because it takes a wildly different direction from their previous works, and is their most unique title in terms of narrative. Key usually makes slice-of-life stories, with heavy amounts of romance, but Rewrite is like Key's attempt at making something like Fate's Stay Night. While their works typically have elements of the supernatural, Rewrite puts this at the forefront, along with fantastical battles over ideals. It's essentially a Chunibyo story, exactly my preference. It's also the first Key title without Jun Maeda at the helm, besides Planetarian. But while Planetarian was a small project, Rewrite was a major game and to follow up on the success of Little Busters. Instead of Jun Maeda, Rewrite has Romeo Tanaka as the main writer. Jun Maeda did contribute by composing 2 songs for Rewrite, but otherwise left the writing to others, while 3 different writers worked on Rewrite. Romeo Tanaka is the main one. He's a writer I'm a fan of, especially after reading Rewrite. He previously wrote Cross Channel, and would later work with Key again in Still of the End. I dismissed Rewrite for a long time, partially because I'm not particularly fond of Key stories, and partially because the length is rather daunting. However, after learning of Rewrite's true nature as a Chuni story, and working up the courage, I gave it a try. Suffice to say, Rewrite impressed me, and left a profound impact on my soul. I'd go as far as to say that it's probably one of the best visual novels I've ever read. It's a masterful story, analyzing the relationship between humans and the planet we live on, as well as the connections we have with each other. I'll talk about why Rewrite is a story that's worth your time, even if you're not usually into Key stories, like me. Now I might talk about things that might be considered small spoilers. Even knowing its true nature as a Chuni story might be considered a spoiler. I won't talk about anything major, but I think Rewrite is best experienced blind, so just play it if you haven't. Rewrite is the story of Tennoji Kotaro, a seemingly ordinary high school student. He's been coasting through life, but feels dissatisfied and wants a change. He ends up forming the Occult Research Society as an excuse to have a good time and make friends. The members of this club include Kanabe Katori, Kotaro's childhood friend, Konohana Lucia, the headstrong class president, Akatsu Shizuru, the quiet underclassman, Otori Chihaya, the odd transfer student, and Senri Akane, the club leader that's a shut-in. They debunk mysteries and goof around. This might sound like a typical slice-of-life setup, but there's more to it than that. A big theme of the Kamen Route is lies, deception, and superficial relationships. All of the heroines are hiding aspects of themselves, showing only one side of them. Even Kotaro is a bit of an unreliable narrator. There are things that he purposely leaves out or glosses over. An example would be his rewrite ability. He never mentions it before he's forced to use it, and even when he does, it takes him a while to explain how it works. This is all done in service of the game's theme about bonds and lull the audience into a false sense of security, thinking that it'll be like previous Key VNs. This deception extended to the marketing as well, as they avoided showing the fantastical elements or the main heroine. Readers would not find out about this until they actually played the game, which sounds like an interesting surprise. You do get hints towards this darker side of Rewrite in the Kamen Route. There are these scenes where Kotaro finds himself in a strange city of Grey. It looks like his own city, devoid of normal people. There are these mysterious, robed figures and large black hounds that pursue him. These scenes are intriguing and otherworldly. They're some of the coolest parts of the Kamen Route. It kind of reminded me of Tsukihime in atmosphere. The slice-of-life scenes are shockingly fun as well. The humor mostly lands, even making me laugh. The interactions between Kotaro and the bro of the story, Yoshino, are pure gold. The whole Yoshino music video bit made me lose it. It felt like an insane shitpost. Kotaro is just an extremely entertaining character all around, and bounces off of other characters well. One criticism I do have for the Kamen Route is Mappy. An app Kotaro uses that lets you tell him where to go. There's a lot of optional dialogue and even side quests with this Mappy feature. It's pretty novel at first, with Kotaro's reactions to various things that you can force him to do being amusing. However, it gets annoying when you have to redo these sections and going through the Kamen Route to do other routes. Another thing that can be a positive or a negative is how different the Kamen Route can be depending on what heroine you're going after. Not huge differences, but you get more scenes with the girl you're going after. These scenes are often good or important. Buster is looking forward to when the routes will branch off and the real story to start. The end of the common route is when things get serious and the story reveals its true hand for the first time. It's a really fantastic sequence that builds excitement and intrigue to what's to come. The common route itself is very long, especially if you factor in all the exclusive heroine scenes. But it's ultimately a fun time and a good introduction to the cast of Rewrite. If you're able to get through it, you're rewarded with the character routes when the story really gets going. There are 5 routes for the 5 main girls, plus the Moon and Terra routes, which are essentially 2 parts that make up the true route. Like I said before, Rewrite had 3 different writers. Romeo Tanaka was the main guy in charge. He wrote a lot of the common route, as well as Kotori, Akane, Moon, and Terra routes. His stuff is easily the best part of the visual novel. The problem arises with the other writers, which makes the routes a bit uneven as a whole. Tonokawa Yuko is another writer that did 2 of the routes. He wrote some routes for Little Busters previously, so I'm not too familiar with his work outside of Rewrite. The last writer is Ryukishi07, famous for Higurashi and Umineko, and many other things. He wrote Lucy's route. Now, they're all good writers, but they all have vastly different styles, and focus on different aspects of the narrative. This can be good or bad depending on who you ask. I do appreciate how different the routes can be. It means you never know what to expect. But like what I said, some inconsistencies arise. To further this issue, apparently the different writers didn't communicate with each other much during development. Ryukishi allegedly finished his route first because of his deadlines and needing to go back to working on Umineko, but he did so without knowing what the actual end goal of the story was supposed to be, or what happens in the other routes, because it wasn't written yet. Someone last made an editing tried to make these routes come together and be a bit more consistent, but that can't fix everything. Production of Rewrite seemed hectic, which reflects in the somewhat messy end result. The varying route quality is a major point of contention, but I'd say that none of the routes are bad. It's just that some end up weaker due to how incredible Romeo Tanaka is. It does make it so that people's rankings of the routes can be pretty unique, depending on whose style or what character resonated with them the most. Obviously, I prefer Tanaka's routes, but the other writers have their merits. The first intended route is Kotori's. There's nothing that directly states that you should do this route first, but the game subtly nudges the player into a route. Her route is the easiest to get into. The most sensible options give you her scenes. You don't need as many points for her compared to the other heroines. Very smart game design. Anyway, her route is a perfect introduction. It introduces the 2 major powers at play from a neutral viewpoint. If you're doing this route first, you'll be as in the dark as to what's going on as Kotaro. And Kotori's explanations shed some light, also leaving some things unclear, leaving room for things to be further elaborated on in other routes. Kotaro is a pretty goofy character in the common route, but this route shows the true depths to her character. She puts on a silly persona to try and keep others at a distance, while trying to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. It's a weight too much for anyone, but she's too stubborn to trust anyone, even Kotaro. The relationship between the two, and the way it develops, is extremely compelling. The power balance between the two is uneven, and she can treat him coldly, but there's a good reason for it. Her backstory goes into some dark places I didn't expect. She had it rough. It's hard not to feel for her. What I really love about this route is the atmosphere. It really does feel like 2 kids that are in over their heads, stuck in a conflict they don't understand. They're powerless before these dangerous factions that are after them, which causes a constant sense of danger. I found the relationship Kotori has with the Key to be quite intriguing. The Key is essentially a manifestation of the planet's will, existing to judge humanity. It's the MacGuffin of the story that every character is after, to either use or kill. How they interact with the Key can illuminate the character's own relationship and ideals about the planet. Victoria wants to protect the Key, but in doing so, coddles it and doesn't allow it to leave for a small protected zone. This causes the Key to be underdeveloped. They are akin to a small child and unable to speak, with the Key being the planet and a force of nature. I think the metaphor is obvious. Being so protective of the Earth, they don't allow nature to grow naturally, can be as destructive as destroying it outright. The climax of the art was extremely emotional and moving. The only problem is that it ends kind of abruptly. I would appreciate another 5 minutes to give closure to Kotori, but it is what it is. Kahaya's route is next. While Kotori's route answers some questions, leaving many things mysterious, here a lot more is explained. Kahaya is actually part of an organization called Gaia that is made up of summoners that use familiars. This route is a major tone shift compared to Kotori's route. While Kotori's route made you feel powerless, Chihaya makes you feel powerful. It's the route that feels most like a battle shonen, filled with deadly duels to the death and shuni action. It's the unlimited blade works of Rewrite. This is a point of criticism as people come to key games for a slice of life, not constant battles. Of course, this isn't something I minded, because I love crazy action. Kotaro learns to master his Aurora and Rewrite abilities under the tutelage of Sakuya, Chihaya's enigmatic butler. Sakuya is present in the common route, but here he gets the spotlight. It could even be considered more of a route for him than for Chihaya, because of how much focus he gets. People here for the girls might be disappointed, but I'm gay and Sakuya is extremely hot, so I don't mind. Seriously, Sakuya is a spectacular character, one of the best in the whole visual novel. He's like a fusion of Archer from Fate Stay Night and Sebastian from Black Butler. He starts out having a somewhat antagonistic relationship with Kotaro. They don't get along because of how protective Sakuya is of Chihaya. This route forces them to grow closer and the relationship is sweet to see unfold. Sakuya and Kotaro have multiple parallels that are made obvious as the story goes on. Chihaya herself is a pretty fun character too, even if she gets overshadowed by Sakuya. She has some of the funniest sprites. She does have some decent development here regarding her place in Gaia and her relationship with Kotaro. Another highlight of this route is one of the antagonists, Midao. He's so cool, a sexy man that gives insane speeches. He ends up in conflict with Kotaro over their ideals. It's a shame that he's only present in this route. I would have loved to see more of him from another angle, maybe being allies in a different route or something. Another thing I have to give praise for is the amount of CGs. There's more CGs than any other route for some reason. I do wish some of the other routes had more CGs, but the amount here does sell the over-the-top battle scenes. With all this praise, you'd think that I love this route. However, I have to say it's one of the weaker ones. The big problem of the route is how cliché it feels. I did have fun with it, but coming after Kotori's route, it didn't have anything mind-blowing or too emotionally moving. If anything, it goes to show how skilled Romeo Tanaka is as a writer. It's hard to follow up a route written by him. By this point, you'll realize the main plot revolves around the battle between two secret organizations over the key, which will decide the fate of humanity. One organization is Gaia, who wants to use a key to bring salvation by destroying humanity to save the planet. Their ideological opponent is Guardian, an organization made up of superhumans that want to save humanity and destroy the key. Guardian sounds like the more benevolent side, with how they put humanity first. But the fascinating thing is that they're both wrong. Guardian is not too much different from Gaia, just on the radical extremist opposite side of the spectrum. They put humanity first, at the cost of the planet. They provide no solutions to saving the slowly dying Earth. They're only delaying the inevitable by destroying the key. Eventually, the Earth will die because of humanity's indifference and irresponsible waste. Guardian is quite literally killing the planet, symbolized by their goal of killing the key, the vessel of the planet. Gaia are obviously extreme in how they're willing to destroy all of humanity, but they have a point about how the planet is dying, sooner than people realize or want to admit. They feel as if there's nothing they can do to save it, besides sacrificing humanity. Gaia is presented as a suicide cult, willing to put all of humanity into their mass suicide. Gaia is made up of misanthropes and outcasts, which makes them very interesting to me. They lure in people who are at rock bottom by promising to give them meaning and salvation through death. It's eerily similar to how real cults operate. Like Scientology, their followers are given power and the justification that everything they do is what's best for the planet. These two factions reminded me a lot of the classic clamp manga X. X is also about two secret factions battling over the fate of the Earth and humanity. The Dragons of Earth, those chosen by destiny to save the Earth by destroying the magical barriers, cause earthquakes and destroy humanity. Their opponents are the Dragons of Heaven, who aim to protect the barriers to save humanity and prevent Judgment Day. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I feel that X was an influence considering that they both tackle similar environmental themes, and are chuny as hell. Anyway, Mirai goes about exploring both of these ideologies by having Kotaro join one of them, depending on the route. Basically, every character you meet will have different perspectives on these factions, especially the main heroines. You have those that are strongly allied with a certain faction and share their views, like Akane with Gaia. Yet there's also Chihaya, who's also allied with Gaia, but doesn't seem to fully buy into their beliefs. I love how Kotaro's relationship with characters can drastically change depending on the route. A character like Nishikuju will have her perspective on Kotaro shift, depending on what faction he's allied with. I adore how different the routes are, and how they can explore different sides to characters. Back to talking about the routes, Lucia is next. Her route is the most unique, as it branches off from the others much earlier, and has a drastically different atmosphere from anything else. It's the route written by Ryukishi07, so that explains it. Fun fact, Lucia was basically made for him. When the team had invited him to look at the character designs and concepts they had come up with so far, Ryukishi noticed that Gaia had 2 representatives, while Guardian only had 1. He requested another heroine be added to make things even, and thus we got Lucia. He worked closely with the artist, Inoue Itaru, to make her a reality, because Lucia wasn't originally planned, and Ryukishi handled everything about her. The other writers didn't know what kind of personality she would have, which is why she's hardly in any of the other routes. Even when she does show up, it's only for like 5 minutes before she disappears from the route completely. It's a shame because I actually quite like Lucia and her route. It's a divisive route and a divisive game, but I ended up really liking it. I think it's better than the routes written by Tonokawa Yuko, but not quite as good as Romeo Tanaka's routes. Lucia doesn't give the best first impression in the common route, as her whole bit there is being tsundere towards Kotaro, beating him up over misunderstandings, because he can't stop licking her used plate. Her behavior is recontextualized with her backstory, which explains why she maintains her distance from others. The route starts off with a mystery concerning a ghost girl. This mystery and investigation are unlike anything else in the game. I found it very engrossing and atmospheric. Unfortunately, Ryukishi does kind of cheat a bit with the mystery. The perspective switches from Kotaro sometimes, but that other perspective isn't reliable. This is a problem because that perspective character doesn't have a reason to be lying to themselves in their narration. It just felt like a cheap way to lead the audience from the obvious conclusion. I have to wonder if there is a scrap plotline about that character having different personalities or something, which would make sense if that was originally the intention. The problem I have of this route is Kotaro feels like he's written similar to the battler from Umineko. He loses some IQ points and becomes a bit more dense. It's a different take on Kotaro from anything else, one that doesn't quite do justice to the intricacies of his character. It is a lot of Ryukishi's writing quirks, which I noticed because I've read a lot of stuff by him. Characters will talk in circles, and the writing can drag on a bit in general. I've gotten used to the repetitive nature of Ryukishi's prose, so it doesn't bother me much, but it is something I've noticed. With my gripes out of the way, let me talk about what makes this route great, particularly Lucia herself. I think she is a very well written and interesting character. She has one of the most depressing backstories of the heroines. Like I said, her backstory makes all of her prior coldness make sense. She has one of the best written romantic relationships with Kotaro. The way the relationship develops is engaging. Kotaro works hard to break down the physical and emotional barriers to make it difficult for Lucia to form bonds with others, which culminates with that incredible scene in the church. Lucia's personal development isn't exactly linear. What I mean is that she makes strides to improve and love herself because of her relationship with Kotaro. However, a certain incident causes her to regress in a way. She becomes fixated on giving her wretched life meaning, no matter the costs. This shift might upset some, but I think it makes perfect sense with her trauma and circumstances. It all goes to show that her trauma still affects her, even after all of her positive efforts. That kind of trauma does not simply go away. Mental trauma is extremely difficult to overcome, and one can easily find themselves slipping back into old ways. So ultimately, I find Lucy's negative development here to be believable, and I think it takes the story in an interesting direction, though a pretty dark one. With the way Lucy's character shifts, so does the narrative of her route. What started as a supernatural mystery turns into a political thriller. It might sound like a jarring shift, but it somehow works. I found the later political stuff to be much more engrossing personally. It's also the route that most delves into the corruption within Guardian. Before, they are presented as much more benevolent and reasonable compared to Gaia. But Lucy's story shows the terrible things Guardian is willing to do for the sake of human survival. All in all, I think that Lucy's route is a beautiful story of trauma and love. There are some odd decisions, but I can look past it when it all comes together so nicely. Chisuru's route is next. She is extremely short and cute, so I was looking forward to her route. Unfortunately, I'd have to say it's the weakest in the game. It's not bad, it's a decent route on its own, but compared to the other routes, it comes up short. Chizuru herself is a great character. I love the interactions he has with Kotaro as he tries to interpret her silence, with shocking amounts of success. Her backstory is incredibly tragic, as you'd expect from Rewrite by now. The way she's able to hold up in spite of everything is impressive in itself. Chizuru's problem is that she might be too perfect. She's pretty static in her route, not developing as much as the other heroines. It kind of makes sense because she has always been presented as the most mature of them, despite being the youngest. The crux of this route is that Chizuru must now live with Kotaro to monitor him. You'd think this would cause them to grow closer, but they already became pretty close before this, so not much really changed. This is definitely the most slice of life route, with a lot of it feeling like not much progress is being made. I like Chizuru a lot, so I can't say I disliked all the cute scenes with her, but I feel it didn't quite have the tight pacing the previous routes had. It's also structured in a weird way, with it starting with Kotaro losing memory of the past month, and then you get a long flashback showing what happened. It's what'll keep you interested, knowing that eventually things will happen. You just have to keep wondering how it got to be the way it is in the present. The worst part of this route is Gil and Panny. I didn't mention them before, but they are these annoying fairy creatures that become friends of Kotaro. They're only in this and Jahaya's route. In Jahaya's route, they felt like they served a purpose, even if Gil could be kind of obnoxious. By the end, I found them to be fairly endearing as they redeemed themselves in the plot. I could not tell you why they're in Chizuru's route. They don't feel like they serve a purpose to the narrative here, they just exist for comedy scenes. The best I can think of is that they exist to reinforce the point that the people of Gaia and Guardian aren't too different. Chizuru is initially hostile towards them because she believes familiars are the tools of Gaia, and therefore the enemy. Yet they all eventually end up getting along, showing that the two sides might be able to come to an understanding if they try to talk to each other. It is pretty amusing how the other writers completely ignore the existence of Gil and Panny. I've been kinda mean to this route, but I'll say when it gets going, it is pretty excellent. The last stretch is extremely cool and tragic. I think it gets across the futility of this conflict. Why do people kill each other? Kotaro was friends with everyone before they split off into their own factions, but they were still all friends. Are these ideals real with killing your former friends over? These kinds of questions are addressed in a poignant scene here. The conclusion is heart-wrenching. It's great enough for me to forgive a lot of this route's shortcomings. There's a plot beat in this route that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but this scene made me forget about that for a bit, by delivering a devastating gut punch one after another. Overall, an uneven route, but not a totally uneventful one. Akane's route is the last of the main five. This is my favorite girl in the common route, and her own route delivers by also being the best of the five. Akane is presented as a shrewd, crafty realist in the common route. He will go to ridiculous extents to debunk Kotaro's ideas about the supernatural, or just to be petty towards him. It's so charming. Akane's route takes a darker direction compared to the others. It focuses on inner Gaia politics. There's two main factions within this organization that are at odds with each other. The reformist faction that wants to turn Gaia into a more legitimate scientific organization, and the traditionalists that cling to their cultish roots. It explores Kotaro trying to navigate these politics and protect Akane. It shows what kind of people are drawn into Gaia, which makes this organization that wants to destroy humanity feel more understandable. Early on, Kotaro says he doesn't care if he's a good person, as long as he can be by Akane's side. To this extent, he even has to kill people, something he has avoided doing in every other route. The development of Kotaro in this route is truly incredible, and a big part of what makes this route so special compared to the rest. He feels more like an anti-hero here. He hates it, but he will stain his hands with blood for Akane's sake. Even his Aurora power becomes more violent and disturbing. While this is an amazing route, this is also where the cracks in the production quality start showing. There are two major antagonists here, Suzuki and Takasaga. Neither of them have a sprite or CG to show their appearance. It's disappointing because these are important characters. They almost feel like faceless NPCs, because you don't get to see them. Suzuki is a very interesting character too. He's a scumbag, one of the most reasonable people in Gaia, once you learn his true intentions. It's just that his methods are deplorable. You see everything from Akane's side, who's opposed to him. Sagasago is also pretty cool as an obstacle that Kotaro must overcome. The other major criticism I've heard from people is that Akane isn't too present in the second half. There's a good reason for this, as she disappears and the focus shifts to Kotaro trying to deal with the weight of her actions on his own. I love Akane's character and think she was used perfectly here. She has a unique role compared to the other heroines, as she's the most morally questionable one. He seems to fully buy into the Gaian ideal of killing humanity to save the Earth, or do anything for that goal. The art deeply explores why she feels this way, which creates one of the most interesting aspects of her character. I say that her relationship with Kotaro is incredibly well done. It's not exactly a romance-centered route, but there are some scenes between Kotaro and Akane that I found rather touching, like when she gives him the key to a room, showing just how much she has come to value and trust him. He is the only one that's allowed to freely enter her abode. Just think of the implications. Anyway, I think her disappearance is justified in the story, and it being more focused on Kotaro is a positive. The epilogue at the end gives nice closure to everything, as Akane has to deal with the consequences of her actions. It's a bittersweet conclusion, not as depressing as Chizuru's end, but not exactly a happy one either. Once you finish the 5 heroine routes, you can finally access Moon and Terra. It would be hard to talk about these routes without spoiling anything, but this is what all of the heroine routes are building towards. The thematic ideas about the environment, humanity, and community are brought to the forefront. The Moon route is short and sweet. Describing it would do it no justice, but is the most surreal of the routes. Kotaro has some interesting philosophical monologues. It's also a final farewell to the Occult Research Society. Lucia kinda gets snubbed here because it wasn't written by Ryukishi, but she gets a really cute callback to her route. Having a final farewell to the Occult Research Society might sound a bit strange because there's still one more route, right? That brings us to Terra, which takes a completely different direction to everything else. Again, not going to spoil anything, but Terra is focused almost solely on Kotaro. All the heroines take a back seat and aren't too present, which seems to have upset some. This might sound weird considering that the entire rest of the game is how you get attached to these characters, but trust me, it makes sense. They have Moon route for everyone to be together one last time, which was satisfying enough for me. The girls are still here. At least Akane and Kotori have a semi-important role. That's because Romeo Tanaka wrote all these routes. So, everything here centers around Kotaro, unraveling all the mysteries about him that haven't been answered. Since this is the Kotaro route, let's talk about him and what makes him such a stellar protagonist. In the common route, Kotaro is portrayed as carefree, perverse, and comical. He forms a club because he wants something to get attached to, somewhere to belong. What he craves is to be recognized and respected by his peers, which is why he'll do anything to stay with the heroine he gets attached to in the common route. Who he's with can change him. While he is a generally kind person, he can take some drastic measures in some routes to achieve his objectives. While Kotaro can be a genuinely funny character, he's best in his serious monologues, where he contemplates life and his values. He's malleable. He's a character that can be entertaining in a wide variety of situations, which is why he's great in every route. Of course, Romeo Tanaka has the best understanding of his character, but the other writers can do cool things with his character too. Akane and Terra routes have the most fascinating developments for his character, especially Terra, which has him go from a moody teenager to a mature adult, with his own ideals that he fights for. He works in a wide variety of situations, with such a compelling core. His rewrite ability is also symbolic of a lot of the story's themes. This ability allows him to rewrite his body and change it to suit his needs. This is something that Kotaro hesitates to use, because he doesn't understand the cost of such an ability. And once rewritten, he can't reverse the effects. Like he says, he can hit the acceleration or the brakes, but there's no reversal. It's an ability that's as malleable as his personality. It's essentially evolution. He can adjust to any obstacle to overcome it. It's meant to symbolize the infinite potential of humanity, a theme the narrative reinforces a lot in Moon and Terra. This ability has a lot of thematic weight. It's crucial to the narrative and message of the game. In addition, the unique use of this ability in each route is fascinating. In routes like Shahaya's, he learns to use the ability to its fullest potential, while in others, like Chizuru's route, he hardly uses it at all, because he doesn't need to. His other ability, the Aurora, is just as cool. It allows him to control energy that comes through his wrists. It's used creatively in every route. You can use them as claws, a projectile, and a lot of other things. What I'm trying to get at is that Kotaro is a thoroughly compelling character. No matter what, he's a joy to follow. He has incredible character development, and just everything I could want in a protagonist. Terra is Kotaro at his absolute best, as it is primarily about him. It really feels like Kotaro versus the world. The Key is another very important character in Moon and Terra. We finally find out what exactly she wants. The Key is more of a concept meant to represent the planet than a character. I find her characterization in these routes to be very interesting. All in all, the Terra route is my favorite part of the game. Kotaro's evolution is perfect, and I think it brings the narrative to a nice thematic conclusion. Rewrite has a lot of characters. It's time to talk about the ones I haven't yet. Rewrite might seem like a story that's all about the cute girls, but I'd argue it's the guys who truly shine in this game. The absolute best among these boys, aside from Kotaro, is Yoshino. Yoshino is one of the best bros I've ever seen in a game. Yoshino is a man that fancies himself an outlaw. Suffice to say, he's a chunibayo. He takes himself very seriously despite the silly things he often says. It's great. I adore his friendship with Kotaro. He claims to dislike Kotaro and acts rather hostile towards him, but the two often end up goofing around like the kids their age. There is a good deal of irony that he's a huge chunibayo. It is the character most disconnected from the supernatural aspects of the story. He's just a normal guy, which is why his presence is minimal after the common route. You could also see his scarce appearances, as Kotaro is straying farther from the normal life he wants. Still, he gets one fantastic scene every route. Possibly my favorite is in Kotori's route, where he knocks some sense into Kotaro when he's basically given up. His big scene in the Moon route is one of the most emotional in the entire story. It left an impression on me and made me really sad. In short, Yoshino is a brilliant character, and I love him. His interactions with Kotaro are what kept me engaged in the common route. Asaka is another really cool character. He's an older gentleman that seems to know more than he lets on in the common route. Yet he acts so bizarrely. I had to wonder what his deal was. What is up with his insane comedy skits? This question and more are answered later. He's pretty important in Shizuru's route, but he truly shines in Terra. I like how he acts as a fatherly figure to Kotaro. Their relationship is sweet. Imamiya is another sexy man that has an interesting relationship with Kotaro. He doesn't do much until Terra route, but trust me, he's a really cool character. I've talked about a lot of sexy men so far, but if there's one woman that doesn't get enough appreciation, it's Nishikujo Toka. She's a teacher at Kotaro's school, and obviously has some involvement in the war for the key. I kinda like her more than any of the main heroines. She can be cute, but dangerous when she needs to be. Her power is pretty cool. My favorite thing about her is how she's like a mother to Lucia and Shizuru. She genuinely cares a lot about these girls, and will do anything to make them happy, which is refreshing after how much hardship those two have had to undergo. I love the little confrontation she has with Kotaro in Akane's route, where she declares that humanity deserves to live, even if they are sinful creatures. It shows that she does take Guardian's ideal seriously. If there's one character that I felt has untapped potential, it's Kashima Sakura. She's the one that could be considered the main antagonist of the story, as she's Guy's holy woman, and the one most determined to bring humanity to ruin. She absolutely detests humanity, to a seemingly maddening degree. Everything you hear about her from other characters is fascinating, actually strikes terror into even those close to her like Suzaki. It's disappointing that she only appears twice in Terra route. Both these appearances, while interesting, are sadly short, and don't add to her character much. She seems like someone that should be the complete antithesis of Kotaro, while he is someone that's pessimistic, yet believes in the good and potential of people. Sakura seems like a complete nihilist. She should be someone that rejects love and any potential humanity might have. It would have been fascinating to see a conversation between the two discussing their differing ideals, but alas, that never happens. She feels more like a concept than a real character. In summary, I'd say that Rewrite has a fantastic cast. There's at least one character for everyone to get attached to, and I end up loving practically everyone. The production quality is a bit uneven, but I think it's good overall. Inoue Itaru is the main artist. She's worked on many key titles in the past, like Air, Clanhead, and Little Busters. However, this was my first time reading a visual novel with her art. Her cute style works surprisingly well for an action-oriented story like Rewrite. I think this style helps in making the audience feel like it'll be a slice-of-life story, like other key games, before revealing its true nature. I thought the guys like Yoshino and Isaka looked a bit weird at first, but I got used to it, and now it's charming. There's a lot of CGs, and all of them look fantastic. However, I think the way CGs are distributed between the arts is uneven. Guy has the most CGs, while Terra, the finale of the story, doesn't have that many. It's sad, but likely a result of the troubled development the game Rewrite went through. Kotaro's design is really cute, so it is a shame we don't get to see his sprite much. He's a defined protagonist, not a self-insert, but you hardly get to see his appearance outside of CGs. I suppose it's because the story is mainly from his perspective, as most of the time we do see his sprite, it's from the perspective of other characters. I have to give high praise to the music. It's all outstanding. It has some of the best slice-of-life music I've heard. There's a wide variety of music to accompany the different tone shifts the story has, from melancholic piano music to hype-inducing battle tracks. Fear, Phobia, Philosophy of Ours, Scattered Flowers, all stellar. Retribution and Irreputable are two of my favorites, because they sound like RPG battle music, and they're associated with some cool scenes. Rewrite is the kind of soundtrack I listen to even outside the game, which is the best thing I can say about it. There's a lot of stuff involved in creating the soundtrack, so I respect everyone involved. Speaking of sound, Rewrite has amazing voice acting too. Lucia's voice actress, Asaki Risa, gives a wonderful performance. I love all the angry screaming she did for the character. Akane's voice actress, Kitamura Eri, also stood out to me as being particularly excellent. Rewrite explores a multitude of themes in its grand length and in many routes. Bullying, trauma, war, friendship, but chief among these themes, and the thing the story centers around, is environmentalism. This idea is shown to the audience immediately through its setting. The city of Kazamatsuri puts a great effort into protecting the environment, causing the city to be full of trees and flowers. Kotori is also really into gardening. There's a lot of plant imagery and constant reminders about nature. This idea becomes central to the story with the introduction of the Key, a manifestation of the will of the Earth that exists to observe and judge humanity. Humanity has taken from the Earth in order to survive. The Earth is plentiful of resources, but it is not infinite. Humanity has taken their pillaging of the Earth too far, with rapid industrialization and overpopulation causing extreme pollution. I feel that some humans take the Earth for granted, because it kind of always has existed and people believe that it will continue to exist in their lifetime. This kind of short-sighted thinking will screw over future generations. Eventually there will be a breaking point, and the planet will become difficult to live on, either due to climate change or some other phenomena. It's hard for individuals to muster up the will to change anything for the better, knowing that the vast majority of pollution is due to massive corporations being uncaring bastards. It is no wonder that the Earth might want to wipe out humanity. This also brings us to the question of if humanity even deserves to be saved. They are responsible for taking advantage of the planet, as well as committing atrocities against each other. Humans are sinful creatures, full of greed, wrath, envy, and all those other sins. However, humanity is also capable of beautiful things. Love and friendships are key aspects of humanity that are seen positively. It's the connections that Kotaro forms with others that ends up saving the day in the moon route. Ironically, these ideas about environmentalism is what ends up dividing the Occult Research Society. These kinds of extreme differing ideals are what split people apart. The Guardian and Guy don't ever seem interested in having a discussion or coming to any compromises, seeking only to wipe the other side out. Humans can be beautiful, but they're also bitter creatures. Rewrite's ideas about the environment and humanity come to a head in Terra. Its conclusion about these themes was a bitter pill to swallow. It felt consistent with the realistic, pessimistic outlook Romeo Tanaka has. It's not something as corny as love the planet or recycle, at least not purely. It really says that humans using the Earth's resources is a necessary part of human progress. Humans will inevitably end up destroying the planet. We just need to use these resources wisely, instead of using them to kill each other. Explore the stars, reach out and better ourselves. That's what we should be doing, while also appreciating the Earth for all it has done for humanity. All in all, Rewrite is a phenomenal story. I feel like any self-respecting visual novel reader should read. It quickly became one of my favorites. It's something I know I'll be thinking about for a long time. It's a story that's grand in scope and ambition. While that ambition might not have always worked out, creating a mismatch of quality and writing, I also find this messiness to be uniquely beautiful. It's very human. The best stories aren't the ones that are totally perfect or devoid of flaws, but rather the ones that can emotionally move you or have some kind of lasting impact. Most of the stories I love are like that, like Maggot Bates. Before, I stated that Stell of the End was Ski's best visual novel, but now I must retract that statement and correct it by saying that Rewrite takes its place. It also further solidified Romeo Tanaka as one of the most brilliant VN writers to ever pick up the pen. If you made it this far and somehow still haven't read Rewrite, just give it a shot. Don't be intimidated by its length and take it at your own pace. Rewrite can be bought on Steam. Rewrite also has a sequel fan disc called Harvest Festa that should be coming out sometime this year, and I'll definitely be checking it out when it does. In addition, there's an anime adaptation I haven't seen yet, so there's still a decent bit of Rewrite content for me. The journey never ends. If you made it this far, thanks for watching.